Oftentimes, here at the Fireside Tales, we like to tell stories that come from the most remote places. Places where you couldn't imagine grand adventures occurring. Spaulding Resort was one of these. Imagine green hills, peaceful valleys, and you'll get an idea of what it was like. It was a small place, but people from across Darkwood would come, and they would enjoy themselves for a few hours after a hard week's work, be it with a game of golf, fun at the arcade, or a lunch at Spaulding Diner. And the owner was Jonathan Hobbs, the kindest man in Darkwood. He was a part-time preacher, and he did as he said. He was always giving to charities and helping the community, and one of his favorite pastimes was getting kids from off the street and reforming them. One of these ended up becoming his right-hand man, Nicholas DeVille. Now, Nick was an ornery fellow, but when Hobbs changed him, he did his best to do good, and he also helped the community, and the two of them should have just had a happy life there. But one day, evil came knocking at their door, in the form of Hunter Adams. Now, when Hunter Adams walked down the road of Spaulding Resort, he had an evil look to him, a look where you could tell there was not a bit of goodness in him. And when the people saw him as they were passing by, many of them went off running. One man even ran across all 18 holes and over this big, huge fence, and then, he's never seen from again. And Hunter Adams, maybe it was partially because how he's dressed with his trench coat and his big hat, but also the fact that he had two bodyguards with him who were the size of gorillas, and they too had a tough look on their face. But Hunter went up to Hobbs's office, and he knocked at the door, and the two of them agreed to have a meeting, and they went down into the basement, and Nick accompanied them. And they talked for a while, and finally Hunter said, "Look, I would like to get down to the point. I would like to buy Spaulding Resort and your church, Somerset, and I'm willing to give you a fair price for it." And he put down the check, and he handed it over, and Hobbs looked at it in amazement. "That's millions of dollars," said Hunter. "That's enough to feed those 9 faces that you have at home, isn't it? And do a lot more. Anything you want. You could give up work for the rest of your life. So, will you sell to me?" And Hobbs said, "Oh, I don't know if I could. Spaulding is my home, and this has become a place where we can help the whole community. I don't know if I could put a price on that." And Hunter tapped his fingers on the desk and said, "Well, how about I make a deal with you? If you sell to me, I will just own this place by title. You can run the 2 places. I don't care about that." Well, Hobbs, he looked over at Nick, and it seemed as if he was about to say yes, but then he thought better of it. He realized that Hunter Adams had been known for being an evil fellow, and had committed a lot of crimes throughout the area. He'd heard from many of the boys that he had helped. And he said, "No, I'm afraid I can't. I just can't." And Nick said, "Damn right you shouldn't. That man right there is the most conniving individual in this world. He would cheat you the moment you sign that check." And Hunter tapped his fingers against the desk again and said, "Well, I can't force you, but I think that you should. You see, there's a thing I forgot to mention to you. Your church is owing its rent, and the landlord is willing to sell to me for a good price. So, if you give me Spaulding Resort and the church, I'll keep it running, and if not, well, the church is going to have to be shut down." Well, Hobbs was looking almost as if he was a bit angry, as if he was about to yell at Hunter for saying this and blackmailing him. But instead he said, I see. Well, could you give me and Nick a moment to talk?" And they went back in the private room, and Hobbs said, "I don't know if there's anything to do. We might have to sell. He's got us cornered." Nick said, "Maybe, but maybe not. I have an idea." And the two went back out, and Nick said, "All right, Hunter, we'll sell to you, but there's a condition. We would like to play for it in a game of golf. You win, you get Spaulding Resort and Somerset Church, and if we win, we get Spaulding Resort, and you have to pay off the church's fine." And Hunter said, "Well, that is an interesting proposition. I have a condition of my own. I will play this game of golf, but I don't enjoy the game myself, so I get to choose my own champion." "Deal," said Nick, "and we get to choose our own champion, as we're not very good at the game." So they shook hands, and soon enough the game was agreed upon. They had to get the champions first. It took a few months. But all of Darkwood came to see this historic moment. There was cotton candy and ice cream and hot dogs and children running and whispers about who was going to win. And soon enough, Hunter and his champion arrived. And this man, I can't say his name for legal reasons. He was a winner of a PGA tournament, but he was a distrustful-looking fellow. He had a big ponytail and a beard, and his nickname was the Clipper, which is how I'll refer to him. But Hunter came up, and you could tell that this man was an athlete, and he was going to win. And Hunter seemed to be certain that he was going to win too, even though there wasn't a trace of emotion on his face as he walked over and he shook Hobbs' head and hoped for a fair game. But at that moment, the other champion arrived, the champion for Hobbs, and he came up in an even bigger limousine. And the man who stepped out was one that seemed as if he had stepped into the wrong story. He was thin and scrawny and had a big nose, but beside him was a beautiful woman, a French woman named Esme, and he pulled her out and gave her a kiss on the cheek, and he smiled, and the children all came up and they began cheering him, and many of the men looked over jealously at the girl, and many of the girls looked at Edwin as if as if they wanted him to walk into their lives. But anyways, the man walked up and he put down the tee, and Hunter said, "Who's that fellow?" "Edwin Mcdoonald," said Nick. "That right there is the luckiest man in the world." "Ah," said Hunter. "Well, he doesn't look athletic." "No," said Nicholas, "but luck will shine on him, I guarantee you, today, as it always does. You know, he wasn't even originally rich, he was poor, but he bought a little bit of desert land that no one thought anything of. He found oil there, then he invested in the stock market and won a bunch of money there. He's been the love of many a beautiful woman until he married the most beautiful woman in the world, and things happen to him like that all the time. It's a power of his. I guarantee you he'll win this match." Well, anyways, Hunter Adams didn't look as if he believed, but they watched as he had his orange ball down there on the tee. It was a very unusual ball, as this was an unusual man. And Edwin, he lifted up his 9-iron, and he hit, and it flew up in the air, and it landed near the green. And Clipper went up, and he ended up beating Edwin on that round. But they went up to the second one, and again, Clipper won. He was below in points. But when they came to the third one, that was when things began to tip in Edwin Mcdoonald's favor, as they always seem to do in these sort of situations. But Edwin, he went up, and he put the golf ball down, and he put his wood down, and as he was swinging, he swung it up in the air, and the ball sailed, and it landed in the middle of the fairway. And up in the sky, there was a hawk circling around. And the hawk, when it saw the ball fall down, it swooped down, and it grabbed hold of the ball, and everyone began to gasp, and they watched in astonishment as the hawk carried the ball up in the air. And then the hawk dropped the ball, and it landed right on the green, and it rolled straight into the hole, and everyone let out a cheer. And Nick said, "You see, that's what I was telling you all about." But things like that began to happen throughout the golf game after that. The ball would fall in a sand trap only to get out. The ball would skip over the water. The ball would fall in the woods only to roll back out as if it had been knocked off of a tree. And at one point, Edwin hit the ball, and it flew right into the rough behind the green. And everyone thought that this was going to be the end, that Edwin was going to lose. But then a moose came out of the woods, and it seemed to be choking, and it and it choked, and it coughed the ball out, and it fell down onto the green and rolled into the hole. And Edwin managed to win that round. But finally, they came to the last, and Clipper, he managed to get the hole, but he was not that close. He was just a little bit behind Edwin. And he managed to hit the ball in the hole, and Edwin needed to make this shot, otherwise they were going to lose. So he put the putter down and he hit it. And the ball rolled, and it rolled right up to the hole, but it didn't fall in. But then it was as if God himself came down upon the world, as there was a loud explosion, a loud bang, and trees began to fall in the forest, and the ground began to shake, and everyone was screaming, "It was an earthquake! It was an earthquake!" And then there was these mounds of dirt that began to form up above, and then the golf ball fell down gently into the hole. And everyone shouted hooray, and they grabbed hold of Edwin, and they threw him up into the air in their hands, and Edwin had a big smile on his face. And it was a happy ending, or at least it was. Hobbs went and had his party, and everyone was happy. But there is one more scene that I must tell you about. For Nicholas went back into a back alley of Spaulding Resort, and he waited there for some time. And at last a man approached, and it was one of his old cronies. And the man had a hawk on his hand, and he said, "Well, that worked out well. This old fellow has done good. I was afraid that he might be losing his eyesight, but he saw that orange ball, and he dropped down, and he put it in the hole as he'd been trained to do." And Nicholas said, "Yes, yes, and here's your paycheck." Two more men came up, one who was in a moose costume, for the people had been a little bit away, and they couldn't see the moose exactly. They could only make it out barely, so they were able to fall for the trick. And another man who had had some dynamite, and who had managed to make the explosion, and there was men down below the hole that had jackhammered the dirt. And they all began talking about how successful everything had been, how they'd managed to fake the tournament. And Nick said, "Well, Hobbs isn't going to be any the wiser, and we won. And you know who we owe this all to? That marvelous man, Edwin Mcdoonald, the luckiest man in the world." And they had a good laugh about that.